In the summer of 1845, two ships sailed north into the Arctic and were swallowed whole by it. Watch them go. They were not a desperate gamble. They were the opposite, the most advanced, most expensive, most carefully prepared expedition the greatest empire of the age could assemble. Two powerful ships. More than 120 handpicked officers and men. Years of food. The finest technology money could buy. They sailed out to enormous fanfare, cheered as the team that would finally conquer the last great blank space on the map. A few weeks later, a pair of whaling ships encountered them, moored to an iceberg, waiting for the ice to open. The men were in good spirits. Everything was going to plan. That was the last time anyone outside the expedition ever saw them alive. Over 120 men, two great ships, all that equipment and confidence and ambition, gone. Not a survivor walked out. And for more than 150 years, the central question hung over them like the Arctic fog: what, exactly, happened out there on the ice? To understand why they went, you have to understand the obsession that drove an entire century of exploration, the Northwest Passage. For hundreds of years, European powers had dreamed of a sea route across the top of North America, a shortcut connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific through the frozen maze of the Arctic. Whoever found and charted it would win glory, trade, and a permanent place in history. Expedition after expedition had tried and failed, turned back by walls of ice, vanishing coastlines, and cold beyond imagining. By the 1840s, only a few stubborn gaps in the map remained. The passage felt tantalizingly close to being conquered. This was the prize. And the expedition was sent to claim it, to sail into those last uncharted gaps and finally connect the two oceans. The commander was a seasoned, respected officer, not a reckless adventurer. The whole enterprise was built on competence, planning, and the unshakable Victorian belief that with enough preparation and enough technology, nature itself could be mastered. That belief was the real cargo on those ships. And the Arctic was about to teach a lesson about it that the Empire would spend the next century refusing to learn. The two ships were, for their time, technological marvels, and that's what makes the story so chilling. This was no flimsy venture. Their wooden hulls had been massively reinforced with iron to withstand the crushing force of pack ice. They carried something almost futuristic for the era: steam engines, adapted from locomotives, that could drive propellers to push them through gaps in the ice when the wind failed. They had internal heating systems to keep the crew alive through the brutal polar winters. They were provisioned for years, tons of food, much of it in the relatively new technology of tinned cans, which promised to keep men fed far from any source of fresh supply. There were even libraries of hundreds of books aboard, instruments for scientific observation, fine china, and silverware. This wasn't just a voyage, it was a floating piece of the Empire, designed to endure. The men who sailed believed, with real justification, that they had everything they needed not just to survive the Arctic, but to beat it. And here is the grim heart of the whole story. Every single one of those advantages, the iron hulls, the steam engines, the years of tinned food, would fail them, or even turn against them, in ways no one in that confident crowd could possibly have foreseen. So what actually happened in the silence after that last sighting? For a long time, the honest answer was nobody had the faintest idea. The men sailed into the maze and simply never came out. We now know, from clues painstakingly gathered over decades, the broad shape of the catastrophe. The ships pushed into the Arctic and, at some point, became trapped, locked solid in the pack ice that the season failed to release. One Arctic winter passed. Then another. The ice that was supposed to open and let them sail on simply didn't. The mighty reinforced hulls that could survive being crushed could do nothing about being frozen in place, immobile, for years. Imagine the slow horror of it. The steam engines were useless against ice that wouldn't move. The heating burned through fuel. The years of provisions began to run down, and the food itself, as we'll see, may have been quietly poisoning them. The men were stuck on 2 ships that had become metal and wood prisons, drifting nowhere, while the short Arctic summers came and went without ever freeing them. The technology had bought them time. But trapped in the ice, with no way out and no rescue coming, time was the one thing that would slowly kill them all. Back home, as the silence stretched from months into years, alarm turned into a national obsession. When an expedition this celebrated fails to return, an empire does not simply shrug. A massive, sustained search began, one of the largest rescue and recovery efforts the world had ever mounted. Ship after ship was sent into the Arctic to find them. Enormous rewards were offered. The commander's own wife became a relentless, tireless force, pouring her fortune and her influence into expedition after expedition, refusing for years to give up hope. The search for the lost men became one of the great dramas of the age, followed obsessively by the public. And the strange, important thing is this: those search expeditions, hunting for the lost, ended up charting vast stretches of the very Arctic the original voyage had set out to map. The mystery itself advanced the geography. In trying to find the dead, they filled in much of the map the dead had died trying to complete. But for all that effort, all those ships and all that money, the searchers kept coming back with the same devastating result: scattered relics, abandoned objects, a few graves, and no survivors, and no clear answer. The Arctic was giving up the men piece by tiny piece, and keeping the story to itself. Out of all those years of searching, there is a single most precious clue, one short document that is, essentially, the only written voice the lost expedition ever sent back to us. Searchers eventually found a note, left in a marker of stones on the desolate coast. It had been written in 2 stages. The first message, scrawled earlier, was calm and routine: all is well, the expedition is proceeding. But around the margins of that same paper, a second message had been added later, and its tone is the tone of doom. It reported that the ships had been trapped in the ice for well over a year, that they had finally been abandoned, that the commander was dead, that a number of officers and men had already died, and that the survivors were setting out on foot, marching south across the ice and frozen land in a desperate bid to reach safety. Read those 2 messages together and you can feel an entire catastrophe compressed into the corner of one page, the swing from confidence to disaster. That note is the hinge of the whole mystery. It tells us the ships were abandoned and the men chose to walk. And it points them in a direction, south, on foot, into the most hostile environment on Earth, dragging what they could, already dying. What happened on that final march is where the story turns from tragic to genuinely harrowing. The men who set out walking were not in any condition to survive what they attempted. And the evidence of how they died, pieced together from remains and artifacts found along their route, is grim. They were starving. Their bodies showed the unmistakable marks of scurvy, the disease of vitamin deficiency that had haunted sailors for centuries, and it makes you weak, it reopens old wounds, it loosens teeth, it breaks the body down. They were freezing, dragging heavy boats and absurd, useless items across the ice. And there is a darker, more debated layer. Many researchers believe they were also being poisoned, slowly, by lead. The theory points to the expedition's own supplies, the soldered tins of food, and possibly the ship's internal water systems, leaching lead into the very provisions meant to keep them alive, dulling their minds and weakening their bodies at the worst possible time. The marvels of their technology turning into a quiet toxin. And then there is the testimony that Victorian England could not bear to hear. The native Inuit people of the region, who encountered traces of the dying men, later reported clear evidence that in their final extremity, starving and with no other hope, some of the men had resorted to cannibalism. Back home, this was met with outrage and denial. The proud empire simply refused to believe its heroes could have fallen so far. But modern forensic examination of the bones found at the sites has confirmed it, cut marks consistent with exactly what the Inuit said. The witnesses everyone dismissed had been telling the plain truth all along. And that is the thread that finally cracks the mystery open, the people the searchers ignored. For over a century and a half, the empire mounted grand, expensive, technologically advanced expeditions to find the lost ships, and largely failed. Meanwhile, the Inuit who lived in that unforgiving land carried the answers in their oral history, passed down through generations, descriptions of the ships, of where they had been, of the desperate men. The problem was that the searchers, for a very long time, did not take that knowledge seriously. It didn't come in the form of charts and written reports, so the experts discounted it. When the lost ships were finally discovered, in the 21st century, found resting on the Arctic seabed, remarkably preserved in the cold dark water, they were located, in large part, by listening to exactly that Inuit testimony. The oral histories pointed researchers to the right areas. The knowledge that had been dismissed for generations turned out to be the key that had been sitting there the entire time. There is a profound lesson buried in that. The most advanced empire on Earth lost over 100 men, in part, to its own arrogance, its certainty that its technology could conquer a place it didn't understand, and its refusal to listen to the people who actually understood it. The answer wasn't hidden by the Arctic. It was offered, again and again, by those who lived there, and ignored. So why does this particular disappearance grip us so tightly, more than a century and a half later? Part of it is the sheer completeness of the failure. This wasn't a small, ill-prepared party. It was the best of the best, the finest ships, the finest planning, the full might of an empire, and the Arctic erased it utterly. There is something deeply humbling in watching such overwhelming confidence meet such total defeat. It is the ultimate story of human ambition running headfirst into a force that simply does not care how prepared you are. And part of it is the slow, fragmentary way the truth emerged, a note in a cairn, a scatter of bones, a forensic cut mark, an oral history finally believed, 2 ships found on the seabed generations later. The mystery gave itself up so reluctantly, over so long, that each new piece felt like the Arctic grudgingly releasing one more secret. Even now, the full story isn't entirely complete, debates continue over the exact sequence of their final days. But the core of it is settled, and it is unforgettable. A confident empire walked into a place it believed it had mastered, refused to listen to the only people who knew that place, and paid for it with every single life. The men are gone. The ships have been found. And the ice, which kept their story for 150 years, has finally let most of it out. So tell me, down in the comments, do you think they could have survived if the Empire had listened to the Inuit from the very start? And if this one drew you in, the file on an entire army of 50,000 that marched into the desert and was never seen again is waiting for you on screen right now.